Okay, we're on. So welcome. This is, of course, That DV Show, episode 4. Thank you for joining us. We are really excited. In fact, Jason and I are absolutely jumping off the walls with excitement with today's show. We've got 2 amazing guests with us. We've got Tegan Smith, CEO and entrepreneur. We've got Tim Duggan, author and founder of Junkee Media, got it there. We're going to be tackling a subject which is becoming front and center for a lot of organizations today, and that is purpose-driven. Being a purpose-driven organization and having impact. And we've got 2 people who've got real positive first-hand experience and are leading, in Tim's case, the whole dialogue, I think, around how organizations can become purpose-driven and what it takes to get there. So let's jump straight in. Tim, you're a media entrepreneur and owner, a writer and a public speaker. Your book, Cult Status, has been in the top 40 business books since it came out in June last year, I understand. You're about to embark on this nationwide speaking tour. We're very lucky to have you here before you actually start on that. This is your sort of practice session.
This is, yeah.
If you get this one right, I think it's going to go okay. We're really delighted to have you here. So let's start by talking about why you wrote the book in the first place. What was it that inspired you or kind of clicked in your brain to make you think that this is going to become a thing?
Yeah, so for the past 15 years, I was running a media company called Junkee Media, and we were a digital publishing company for millennials and Gen Z.
Yep.
Basically anyone kind of younger than me. As I was saying before this, I consider myself the world's oldest living millennial at 40. And so we've been publishing content for young people for a very long time. And as part of doing that, we made it our mission to try and understand them more than anyone else out there. And so as part of that, we used to do a lot of research into the audience to try and figure out what makes them tick. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they feeling good about the world or not? Mm-hmm. And it was in that moment of doing that research, we did this research study for over a decade, where we spoke to 25,000 young people and kind of tracked them.
Okay.
And it was whilst doing that research that I realised that there was something interesting going on that was bigger than just this generation.
Right.
And that was this kind of rise of how they think about business, how they want to spend their money, how they want to consume, and how they expect businesses and brands they work with to treat their staff and suppliers and their consumers and the environment, things like that. It must be pointed out, though, that although the book Cult Status was about millennials, and that's kind of been the space that I've kind of worked in, it's not only millennials.
Right.
It's kind of anyone who... Millennials are just the people that have been most affected by all these macro changes going on with the world because they're in that kind of infant stage of becoming adults and being able to kind of move into positions of power. But really, I think anyone who's aware and open to kind of these influences feels the same way.
Yeah, do you think that is relevant just to the millennials, or do you think there was movements before that of this kind of revolutionary thinking of, I guess, more meaningful relationships with work and supply chains and so on?
Yeah, so purpose-led businesses, I think it's the word du jour at the moment, and everyone likes talking about it, and sometimes it can be a bit of a marketing buzzword for every business to say, what's your purpose, and find your purpose. And I think that kind of obscures the fact that, as you were saying, it's actually been something that's been around for a long time. So millennials didn't discover it. Right. They weren't the first people. I think they're the first people to kind of popularize it and bring it into the mainstream. But if you think about brands that have been around for a long time, like The Body Shop and Anita Roddick, and Patagonia, and kind of businesses like that were almost seen as environmentalists, and they were seen as lefties, and like Anita Roddick and people like that. They were
tree huggers.
They were tree huggers. They were outside of the mainstream, and they were these lefty, environmentalists that just wanted to, save the environment and not have cruelty on animals.
But they were a product of the sort of hippie generation, the 1970s, and flower power and so forth.
And they were. And so if you think about it, baby boomers or that kind of generation were the original environmentalists. They kind of created the concept of looking after the earth.
Just wasn't mainstream.
Would you have involvement in that, Paul?
So you put it to me. No, I wasn't part of the flower power movement. My parents might have been though, Jason. Thanks for that.
It does feel like the one thing that's different now is that there is that awareness there,
Yeah.
but it's kind of moved away from being a want into a need. So I think where our parents were kind of hippies and they saw the environment, it's like, oh, isn't it nice if we can kind of be at one with the earth and hug trees?
Yes.
And I think now people have realised, no, this is not just this nice ethereal thing to have over there. This is something that the world is falling apart. It's on our watch. And we need to do something about it to change it.
So do you genuinely think that when people are going for jobs and looking for employment, that they're actually asking their employer, tell me what your agenda is on sustainability, tell me what your impact you're trying to have on the planet and on society? Are those questions that are more front and centre than they...
Yeah, I think people do their research.
Yep.
So they might go online and see, is a company greenwashing, which is where a company says that we're environmental but just uses it as a marketing technique, or are they genuine in what they do? Yeah. And there is kind of this rise of companies that are purpose-led and are thinking about a business in a different way. And there's even job boards now of, you can go on there and if you want to work for a purpose-led organisation, you can go to a specific job board that is just for jobs at purpose-led organisations. Right. And they're becoming hugely popular.
Yeah, yeah. Tegan, we're going to talk about your business in more detail in a moment, but tell me, when you joined OPAL, was that something that was really important to you, was establishing an impact and a purpose for the business?
Yeah, I couldn't work for a company that didn't have a greater purpose than just making profit. And when you're not the one making all the profits, what's the point? What is the point of turning up to make profit for someone else every single day at the expense of your own goals and what fulfills you and the environment and exploitation of other people?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a little bit, keep getting in trouble with my mic. It's a little bit of this trying to find this balance between profit and purpose, right? But, it's like something that we all talk about, but ultimately it's really hard to move. I mean, if we're all honest, it's really hard to move away from, especially as a business, looking after the bottom line, and as a professional or an employee, trying to determine, if there was like a kind of comparison between the values, like a shared value in the organisation and your paycheck, and the more meaningful work you're doing is increased and you're getting paid less for it. Although the intention of people might be, like that's great and I align with all that, I mean, I find it really hard to believe people, if they're given the option, they do kind of give that up. I know it happens, but do you think that is changing more and more?
Yeah, I think we have to stop thinking of it as one or the other.
Right.
So either profit or purpose. And I think in the past, it feels like there's been a bit of a trade-off between either you're for purpose or you're for profit. And in fact, I think there's a lot of really good examples now of companies that are actually able to balance both of them. Who Gives a Crap toilet paper, a great example of that. They literally, talking about profit and purpose, they donate 50% of their profits to purpose. And that's the perfect, not perfect, it is a balance that's working really well. They're making a lot of money for their shareholders. They're making a lot of money to distribute for a cause.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to something you said earlier though. I think it's easier to build that in from the start.
Yeah, like creating the actual business around the problem you're solving, as opposed to trying and fit it into an existing business model. Like, look how green we are, and we've got some initiatives, but what are we actually doing? I mean, now I feel that's like a bit of responsibility of business in general. I mean, what is the role of business in society to have a kind of, what are they bringing to the table? Like, what's the purpose of business?
And I think the challenge for established businesses is where do you start? If you're an established business and you're not purpose-driven and you're right down the profit end of the spectrum, how do you even begin to start? Well, I suppose there's a book that could help with that. I don't know, but so when it came to writing the book, who was your audience? Who did you imagine would be reading?
Yeah, the book? So the audience really was people that are thinking about starting a business and hadn't started it and wanted some direction. Okay. So it kind of started there. Yeah. However, the feedback since it came out is actually a lot more broad than that. And
Yes.
I think when you write a book, you actually need to have one person in mind that you write it for.
That's
The
common knowledge.
one sole
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
And so I kind of
Yeah.
had one person in mind when I wrote that. But if you're a big business, and majority of people work for big businesses, as I think
Yes.
70 or 80% of people work for someone else and work for another company.
Yeah.
And I think in that case, you've just got to have true believers at the top. So the CEO
Yep.
or the board or the executive team need to actually believe that there is a purpose there, or that they want to do more than just make money. The problem with that is that our entire capitalist system
Yes.
is set up to reward shareholders, and almost shareholders exclusively kind of take money out, create money, and that is the tension.
And there's a risk if there can't be some mechanism for kind of enabling that it comes across in an authentic way. You know, it's the kind of dad dancing thing. If yes, they want to become purpose driven, but how do you get somebody whose mind is programmed to think an entirely different way, to think in that way in the first place? Do you think there's a path to achieving that?
I do. I think either there's two paths. One is that someone thinks that way. So a CEO who's in a company who might just be, he might have kids and kind of seen
Yep.
what the kids think about a certain issue.
Yep.
Or he might have, he or she, might really believe in the idea of purpose. The other path is where someone at the top or people at the top don't believe in that. And in that case, you've kind of just got to wait until they're no longer at the top.
Right.
And someone coming through
Could be a long wait.
it might be a long wait, but that's the change I think it's going to need to take.
Right.
And so can it not change from the bottom up though, around, if it's really important to people? I know, and actually something you mentioned in your book is like leading from the middle. I don't know if it's too early to be kind of, anyway, but is that, is like, how does that kind of, what's a mechanism for change within an organisation? If
Yeah.
they don't have that kind of, because I mean, imagine a lot of the leaders of these bigger companies that are getting pressure from their shareholders, which is they're investing in that company to get financial returns. So the metrics of success there are purely financial. So they're going to find it very difficult to change their kind of measurements of success. How might they navigate that?
Yeah, there is a path where it can come from the ground up.
Yeah.
But it's really freaking hard.
Right.
I think it can be movements like that kind of like swell from the community or swell from employees.
Yeah.
It's a hard road to get there because there's a lot of discontent. There's a lot of, kind of like disruption that needs to take in order to get people at the top to take notice. So I think the simplest way is you kind of either get the people at the top, make sure the right people at the top, or move them on and put some millennials in charge.
Yeah.
Look at the businesses or countries around the world where millennials are in charge. Let's look at New Zealand. They're doing pretty well.
Yeah, yeah.
Who wouldn't want to be them right now?
Yeah.
And is there anything that you think needs to happen through the education system, or that governments and authorities could be doing to kind of foster the right environment for this to happen in?
Yeah, totally. I think there is a kind of a push towards encouraging the skills that we're going to need in the future: entrepreneurism, resilience, even kindness and empathy and consent, and all these kind of like conversations and stuff that are happening at the moment.
Yes.
A lot of these things have been missing from our education system.
Yeah.
And I actually think that they're all kind of intertwined with, look at, the consent conversation going on at the moment. That really is kind of about empathy and understanding from someone else's perspective. And there's a way that, you can teach empathy to someone, and that kind of relates to if you were therefore a leader and you're running a business, you should also have empathy for other people around you and your staff and your suppliers and the environment.
Yeah.
So I think it's all kind of tied up in the same idea of just being kind to everyone around you, including the environment.
What's an entrepreneur?
An entrepreneur?
Yes.
Oh, you have to read my book. No, I don't think you have. Great question. So an entrepreneur is, I needed to come up with a name that described the people that I was seeing that were starting these businesses. So they were, there was dozens of them that I kind of met as I traveled around the world. And I kind of thought that the word entrepreneur it just had a lot of connotations to it. Yeah, I think Silicon Valley is kind of eaten.
It's a fascinating word.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, and I think some people love it.
Yeah.
I think Silicon Valley and kind of tech has like taken the word entrepreneur and kind of swallowed it whole and spat it back out.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that I was speaking to, a lot of women, a lot of diverse people, a lot of younger people, were kind of being like, I make stuff. I'm creative. I'm not an entrepreneur. I just build things. I create things.
Right.
So I came up with the title Entrepreneur, which is someone that undoes all of the old rules of thinking around business.
Yes. Which is something to do with your 7 steps.
It is. Yes, it is contained within the 7 steps to build
I'm just
a business.
trying to cue it up for you. If you want me to read them out, I can.
No, I've got them in front of me here, thank you. And I wrote a whole book about it.
I know you did. So in all seriousness, you wrote the book, and what I love about the book is that besides, painting the picture for us and helping us understand why it's so important, you then go into some really forensic detail about the things that you need to do in order to build this based on the evidence that you gathered. And some of the stories, by the way, are amazing. The Gilly Hicks one about authenticity is great.
Yeah, wonderful story.
How did you then arrive at these 7 steps?
Yeah, it was through a giant process of mind mapping everything down. And I did a hell of a lot of interviews. I married them with the research that we'd had, and then married that with my own experience of co-founding Junkee Media over the years and building that and then selling that in 2016. And all of them kind of became this like jumbled mess of information on a page.
Yep.
And then I luckily worked with wonderful editors at my book publisher called Pantera Press to kind of try and make some sense of it. Because what I wanted to do was order all of the disorder and all the information. And
You
make
needed a management consultant.
That's what they're for.
Yeah.
Oh, I knew they had a purpose.
We would do that in an afternoon. Carry
I
on.
think I did it a bit cheaper than you charged me.
Almost certainly.
And so what I wanted to do was I started looking at what do all these things have in common. So all of these stories and kind of mind mapping them and put 3 or 4 founders together and said, okay, they think about the world like this. And then started asking people and kind of testing those hypotheses.
Right.
And so it all then turned into 7 steps. And I'm a very practical person. Like I love theory, but then I read the theory and I'm like, okay, like show me how to do this.
Yeah.
Like give me.
What do I do?
Yeah, what do I do?
Actions, like,
Yeah, so it turns into 7 steps. And then at
Yeah.
the end of each step also there's exercises.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that really stands out in the book is there's a practical exercise at the end of each section to help people connect with it. And I think particularly for adults, that's the way they're likely to learn, by giving them a practical example to tie to their own situation and their own business.
Yeah.
It works really, really well.
Yeah, the practical section is, anytime I read a book, like one of my favourite books is Getting Things Done, David Allen. Do you know that?
I don't know that book.
I don't think
A great book.
Yeah.
And every year I reread it. And it kind of just works with me and the way I think about information and trying to not get overwhelmed with all this lots of information coming in. And that's a very practical book. Kind of tells you what to do step by step.
Right.
Yeah, it's great. Getting Things Done. David Allen.
Making a note. So one of the 7 steps I just wanted to go into in a bit more detail. This, in fact, Jason mentioned it. Leading from the middle. So you talk about the need for engagement and the need for people to feel that they've got some vested interest in this. How does leading from the middle make that work?
Yeah, so leading from the middle came from that process where I spoke to lots of people. I tried to digest it all and trying to figure out what the leadership style was that was emerging. And I looked at and read, all the leadership books and business books, and it felt like there was 2 different ways of thinking about leadership. One of them was lead from the front, which was where someone kind of goes ahead and says, "This is what we're doing," and leads from the front. And then the other style was leads from behind, and people like Nelson Mandela kind of popularized that way. The way that he talked about leadership was like he was a shepherd, and the people that he worked with or followed him were like flock, and he was like directing them where to go. And the more I looked into that, the more that neither of those really resonated with what I was seeing. And instead there was this new type of leadership model, which I kind of coined as lead from the middle, around if you have a clear purpose as an organisation, you can communicate what that purpose is to other people so they see it, both your staff, your suppliers, your customers, then you can kind of walk alongside your customers and your staff and your suppliers as they get to that destination, and it can kind of lead you into different areas. And I just think it's a really nice way of thinking about leadership, because it's kind of around almost like, as long as everyone understands where they're going, you can kind of go there with other people.
Yeah, it's like a collective kind of purpose, as opposed to, I feel like, I mean, being part of that generation of change, I feel like there is a real, or more of an interest in, like, nobody wants a hero anymore. Like, there's no like, oh, he's going to take us to greatness, or like, you know, Genghis Khan leading or something like that. But having like more of a, you know, a collective kind of purpose where we're all in it together kind of is a more meaningful way of working. And there's a lot of these things, you know, like communities are a big part of that. And, you know, that's kind of what we're doing in Digital Village as well, of like being able to work together to a greater vision. And so another thing that so how does that, leading from behind, that was another kind of, which is a little bit of an older traditional way as well. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Do you know the author Simon Sinek?
Yes.
Start with Why and stuff. Amazing author. He talks about it as a just cause. Is his kind of way of, as an organisation, having a purpose, you should have a just cause, which is bigger than you, is bigger than what you sell. It's the reason why someone will come and work for you for 10 years and get up every single day and love what they're doing. And that kind of fits in with the kind of that same concept of leading from the middle. Where the most important thing is to have a clear purpose, communicate it easily, and make sure that everyone in the company knows what the purpose is, from the receptionist through to the CEO. Every single person should know what it is, and if they can't, then how can they possibly subscribe to this leading from the middle, subscribe to the just cause, as Simon Sinek calls it?
So because, you know, it's a little bit like values, a little bit, you know, everyone's like, this is what we do, this is our purpose. Everyone from the secretary to wherever on site knows what it is. But it rarely comes up in, I mean, how does a business expose that to people? And then how do they actually put that, how do they kind of make that part of their daily activity? And another question, I guess, is measuring that, which measuring impact is like pretty difficult to do.
It is. The good thing is it's becoming easier as it becomes more popular. I think more people are understanding what impact is and how to measure it. And I think everyone over the last couple of years has kind of struggled a bit with how to actually measure my impact. There's several ways of doing it. One way that I like is the concept of an impact statement, which is something that I kind of talk about in the book, which is every business has a mission statement, or should have a mission statement, kind of what you do. And I firmly believe that every business then should take that to the next level and have an impact statement, which is a simple statement, one sentence, that describes exactly what the impact is that you want to have in a language that a 7-year-old would understand, that you can measure, that grows with you, that could change every 2 months, 3 months, as long as you update it, often as you update your goals. And you should print it out and stick it up on your desk. Like, it shouldn't just be a value that someone pulls out once a year at the strategy day and then everyone forgets about. It should be something that you look at every single day, and
it drives behaviour.
It drives behaviour.
You know, so if you're asked to do something that isn't concomitant with the statement, you've got to question.
You've got to filter.
So why am I being asked to do that when our impact statement says this?
I think it also helps you through the tough times. Like if you're there and you're like, oh, I don't want to do one more bloody Zoom call. If you are sitting there and your impact statement says that your aim as a business is that you are trying to
make more meaningful way of working. That's ours.
And so that would be the mission statement, or the version of the mission statement, and then the impact statement adds the word "so that" to the end of that, and then quantifies it. So make work more meaningful.
A more meaningful way of working.
More meaningful way of working, so that. Then the impact statement would be the number of people that you're trying to reach and the change that you want to have in them. So it'd be so that 1,000 people a month can feel better
happier
about
in their
themselves,
work.
and
Yeah.
you know, whatever it is, you need to
Yeah.
workshop that.
Yeah.
But that like so that and then going into what it is,
Yeah.
that means when you're like fatigued and you like can't be bothered doing anything more, you look up there and you're like, if this is going to help me help 1,000 people a month feel better about their blah blah blah, then it's worth it.
So true. Which brings us on to Tegan. So yes,
I was going to say just like that's the whole point, right? Having purpose in our work and being able to do that day to day. But I was interested in measuring that because data. There's a lot of new businesses around, especially over the last few years, that have a lot of money's gone into like measuring impact, like sustainability initiatives of like how do we running this and how do we measure that, and it's a pretty interesting space, but it rarely works. In your case, it's a little bit easier because you're not really, the impact is a little bit more measurable, but you're using data to.
Yeah.
But before we get onto that, did you want to have anything about measuring success in those? Because I'm kind of interested to know that.
Yeah, so I think it's about, first of all, figuring out what you want to measure within that. So I'll use an example of Allbirds, which is the shoe company. I talk about them a bit in the book, and I spent some time with them in San Francisco when we could go to San Francisco. And the way that they measured their impact is reducing carbon emissions in the making of their shoes. They've obviously lots of different ways. And they have this kind of very complicated formula that looks at everything from their staff's emissions, their offices, how they make the shoes, their suppliers, how it gets to somebody, and they come out with a figure at the end that says X, something per something, and that's a number that they look at. And recently they open sourced their kind of complicated formula, and they open source released a spreadsheet and said anyone that's producing things, you can also use this spreadsheet to figure out what your carbon emissions are if you produce products.
Like a manufacturing or supply chain?
The whole thing. So
wow.
they look at it from go to woe. And if you go to Allbirds', I think it's on their website, it's on I shared it on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. A really nice example of up until that point, if you were a company that was producing something, how are you going to figure that out? And now you can learn from someone who's already done that. So I think it's going to get easier over time.
Yeah, as there's more like people, business learn.
There's also this criteria you talked about with B Corp, which is the mechanism for determining whether an organisation is purpose-driven.
So B Corp's an amazing idea. I spoke to the founder of B Corp last week for my next book that's coming out soon. Coming out in 13 months.
Okay, all right.
So it's not soon.
Not that soon.
No.
Soon compared to how long for that one to come out.
Yeah, totally, yeah. And so B Corps, the kind of concept of B Corps is kind of like originally stood as a benefit corporation, and it was a way to look at companies that add more than just profit, that aim for more than just profit. So they might aim for how they deal with their suppliers, how they deal with the environment, how they deal with the entire kind of ecosystem around it. And then B Corp is a certification process that allows companies to kind of go through that process. I think they've got 5,000 of them around the world.
Wow. It's pretty rigorous.
Okay.
It's very rigorous.
Yeah.
It's an amazing. And then every B Corp, and in Australia, there's everything from Intrepid through to Kathmandu, through to Bank Australia. There's kind of like quite a few in Australia, and they've just done an amazing job of kind of putting some rigor around something that could be just like a nice airy-fairy concept and actually giving it real strength.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to that. I'd like to move on to you, Tegan, because I think interesting perspective from your point of view. I mean, you are a true purpose-driven leader in your own business with a passion for uncovering ways to improve treatment outcomes for sufferers of rheumatic diseases. And I'd like some clarification on that because I'm still not quite clear on exactly what it covers.
Pretty used to that.
Start with a science lesson.
So you've got as many academic achievements as I've collected parking tickets, including a fellowship at Harvard Medical School where you were studying the causes for male infertility. So in 2018 you became the CEO of OPAL Rheumatology Limited, which is definitely a for-impact company. So you're collecting data from 210,000 patients around Australia on rheumatology and have got information on 1.3 million clinical consultations. One of the most powerful data sets of rheumatology globally. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
What is rheumatology exactly?
Okay, so I'll start with a little science lesson. I'll try and keep
Okay.
it simple, but
Yep.
let me know if anything doesn't quite hit the mark. But rheumatic diseases are largely autoimmune diseases. So we all have an immune system in our body, which is a whole bunch of sophisticated cells that cruise around, and their job is to make sure that nothing foreign comes into the body, like viruses or bacteria, and they deal with that, get rid of it, and off you go. You're all healthy and good. Whereas in autoimmune diseases and rheumatic diseases, the immune system turns on you and it starts to attack you as if you're foreign. So rheumatic diseases are largely conditions that affect the joints or connective tissues, blood vessels, the spine. Basically your immune system just starts to attack you, and they're incredibly painful, and they result in a lot of fatigue, and they're very debilitating. And the real kicker is that they are incurable. So once you're diagnosed, you're dealing with this forever. So patients are receiving very carefully managed treatment for life in a way that can suppress this out of control immune system, but while also keeping the immune system functioning in a way that keeps the human healthy. So it's a very, very delicate balance.
And what is it that you've been able to do with your business to help that process?
We're doing a lot. We're using data to try and understand. Firstly, so OPAL's built on a foundation of technology, right? So rheumatology is a specialty which is practiced out in the community. About 90% of rheumatologists are out in private clinics in the community. So the knowledge around the presentation and progression of these diseases and how to manage them safely, they are not concentrated. The wisdom is not concentrated in a hospital or an academic setting. The wisdom is distributed out in the community. So to understand these diseases, we need to find the people who have the wisdom, who have dealt with these, and it's people distributed and scattered. So back in 2009, actually, way before my time, I didn't start OPAL, I just joined it recently, but a couple of very forward-thinking rheumatologists partnered with a software provider, and they had a bit of financial backing from Roche, which is a big pharmaceutical company, and they custom-built an electronic medical record which rheumatologists could use in their everyday encounters with patients to capture and store all of their clinical information. And they designed it so it would be really efficient and a good way to deliver high standard of care. And then the data that goes in, it's not free text notes that no one would ever be able to understand. It's all structured. So then we can pull it all out, de-identify it, so we don't know who's who, pull it all out, aggregate it, and then use that for research. And we've now got 112 rheumatologists around Australia, which is around a third of all rheumatologists in Australia. So a large sample size, and they're collectively managing over 210,000 patients, and we're a fly on the wall for 1.3 million clinical encounters. So the power of this data set is just extraordinary.
And this is just in Australia at the moment?
This is just Australia, yeah.
And is that information, after it's kind of aggregated, given back to them to actually assist them in how they care for their patients? Is that the kind of cycle?
Yeah, in a way, definitely. So we take the data and we generate what we call real-world evidence. So you might not know that term, but we've all just got schooled recently on what real-world evidence actually is and why it's so important. So the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine, so we all just heard about these scary blood clots that came out. So in clinical trials, they tested the vaccine on around 60,000 people, and it was effective and it was safe, and it went out into the market. And it wasn't until it got out into a very large population of very diverse people that we realised that there was a bit of a blood clot issue. So blood clots only show up in 6 people out of every 1 million that are vaccinated, so it's very, very, very rare. So these things we don't pick these things up in clinical trials because there's just not enough people. So what OPAL does is we pull out all this data, and we've got a lot of patients on very sophisticated medications, pull all the data out, and then we generate real world evidence to firstly see how well these medications are performing in real patients in the real world that may have been excluded from clinical trials as well, and at a large scale. And also we're digging around to find if there's any patient characteristics or biomarkers or anything that can predict how well a patient will respond to a treatment. And so trying to personalise their treatment as well by understanding how these medications are used in a large population. And then we're also, there's a lot of unmet needs in our patient community, so we also use data to go to the government and say there's a need, we need new medications here, and then that helps support bring new medicines into Australia for patients. And then, all that information is published and it goes back into the rheumatologists who are treating the patients, and they can apply what we learnt to the very next patient that walks in the room.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really streamlining research to patient. It's very, very streamlined.
So Mr. Measurement over there, how do you know what impact you're having as a result of the data that you're able to provide back to these clinicians?
Yeah, so we've done a couple of studies and we're about to do a 10-year follow-up. So we did a study looking at how many patients were achieving disease remission, which means their disease by clinical characteristics is under control. And back in around about 2010, it was only about 30% of patients that were reaching remission, so about 70% of patients were still really struggling.
Okay.
Then we redid that study 5 years later and we found that it was closer to 60% of patients reaching remission. And we're about to do it again and we have a feeling it's going to be even higher.
Wow.
But we're not going to stop there, obviously. Great, all our patients are in remission. We know that we've recently just developed new technology to push it forward even further. We're going to go as far as we can. So we developed technology to get more information from the patient to provide it to their doctor. So the patient, we know that our patients, we've done some research on this, patients in remission are often still experiencing a lot of fatigue, or their mood is low, or they're still in pain. So we're taking it to the next level and we're really developing patient-centred care. We want to know about the whole patient, not just the disease. We want to know about the patient that has the disease. So we've just rolled that out recently, and it's a very new perspective.
That's interesting. I mean, because I was just going to ask, is because, I mean, that's a really meaningful use of data, and actually being able to learn from, what do you call them? Having some wisdom from the community of doctors, essentially. Yeah. And then being able to provide that back to help them all do a better job. It's like a collective intelligence. I think that's such an amazing thing. But in data, there's always there's a risk of what you're making it mean. So misinterpreting the data, and then, in this kind of world where consumers and business and government are all making data-driven decisions, and it opens up if it's kind of making incorrect decisions based on poor data, or not poor data, but just making the wrong meaning out of the data. Yeah. So that sounds like it's providing more context to that data.
And a really cool thing about OPAL is a lot of data is you can create any story you want with data. Pretty much, you decide that that's what you want to get out of it. You cut it up in a way that gives you that response that you want. But because OPAL is run by scientists and clinicians, we know what the data means. As scientists, we apply real rigour. Everything is peer-reviewed by other scientists before it gets out into the clinic and into patients as well. We have the data, we know what it means, and our rheumatologists they're the ones that do the research as well with us, and they're the ones that have to see these patients every day, and there's no benefit in picking and choosing information, because if the patient doesn't benefit, then they don't benefit as rheumatologists.
So do you think we're too, beyond that, because that's like a very good example and probably, but do you think, and I'm not really suggesting it, but it's just a question, whether we are becoming over-reliant on data?
Yeah, it is a concern. For some things we are, but it comes down to, I think, we need data scientists to understand how you cut up the data makes a difference, and you can't go in looking for an answer, because you'll always find the data that supports what you're looking for. So I think it's on people that are handling the data to apply some rigour and come in with ethics and morals and understanding the impact of what they're doing as well.
Yeah.
So you're obviously very passionate about what you do. How do you personally balance the kind of purpose and profit equation as a CEO?
So our purpose, having a purpose, a very clear purpose, makes it very easy. From my perspective, I think OPAL is too valuable to fail. And by valuable, I don't mean returning a financial return to shareholders. I'm talking about valuable in terms of how we can impact each individual patient through their rheumatologist. But suffering doesn't occur in isolation. Suffering is something that radiates out. So it's not just that patient that's suffering, it's whole communities that suffer. So by us helping that person, we're collectively improving the health of entire communities, I think. So having a purpose like that, we know where we're going. Mm-hmm. It's a wild ride to get there sometimes, but it's very, very clear who we're here to serve, essentially. And when, like you're talking about, Tim, having a purpose and being able to communicate that to everyone that you work with and all of your customers and everyone, you know where the boundaries are as well. You know what will be and won't be tolerated. And those that are not aligned with your values, they fall off. And you don't want them to come with you either. So you end up being supported by groups that really value what you're doing and love what you're doing. So
I also imagine with something like that, your mission statement would be quite clear. And if you wrote an impact statement, you'd know, being a scientist and kind of coming from that, working with science, and knowing that world, it'd be very numbers driven and like number of people and the change that it's had in them, like that research results and stuff like that's amazing. Yeah,
that's just in our population though. Everything, all our research that we do, it goes global, it's published globally. So we're helping patients all around the world, not just our patients. So it's hard to quantify that impact when it goes that broad, but we can just look at our 210,000 and see the difference we're making.
Yeah.
And are you looking to expand beyond Australia and New Zealand, or is it just Australia?
I'll get back to you on that one. It's a big question.
Yeah.
But yeah, with OPAL, balancing profit and purpose, we're not scared of making money. The more money we have, the more impact we can make, because it's a not-for-profit, so all money goes straight back into our vision. It gets us closer to our vision. So it's easy. When you have a strong purpose, it's easy. Business is easy.
Yes.
And how has you had a pretty interesting kind of career or life journey with work, and you've you've been involved in a number of different areas, but moving into the business world, how have you? I'm interested to know what that experience has been like for you, as a younger person and also as a woman.
Good question.
Yeah.
To be honest, it has been wonderful. Mm-hmm. It has been wonderful. I have a great board that are very, very supportive, and all the people that I work with, I never feel like I'm less valuable because I'm a woman, ever. I've never felt that way. And I think it's important for women to speak about positive experiences as well, because we hear so much in the news of politicians and men in leadership and whatever doing awful things to women, and you assume that that's just what life is like as a woman, where it's heavy to hear all that stuff. So I think it's important to hear the good things as well. I think my biggest insecurity has been being young, more so than being a woman. I came in with no business experience and I had to feel my way around and learn it, and I think in many ways that's been my superpower, that I've come in with a real deep alignment in what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and the science side of it, and then just make it happen.
And this is kind of, I guess, a conversation for everyone, but how does and we were kind of talking a bit about it the other day, and I can't remember the exact kind of question, but essentially aligning work and life. So because you're doing quite meaningful work, like both of you are, and so something that we kind of talk a bit about is work-life balance, and I'd be interested to kind of get your perspective on that, and is it a balance of life and work, or are they the same thing, or what is it to you guys?
For me, it does get hard sometimes, because like I said, OPAL's too valuable to fail. So if it comes down to something that I want to do and the business potentially going under, I'll go to the business. it's what you have to do as a CEO,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
You've got to make it survive, it's your job. But otherwise, my life is great, absolutely great. For the most part, Opal is run from a beachside cafe. I'm never wearing shoes. People probably think I'm a blogger or something. And that's our culture of the company. We're all humans.
Yeah.
We take care of, we know that when you're working towards a big mission, you need to take care of yourself, because if you burn out, then you're done.
Yeah.
You can't achieve that vision at all. So I really make sure I take care of myself. Had a nap at lunchtime yesterday. My co-worker today was feeling unwell. I said, take all the naps you need.
Yeah, quite right too.
I feel like the luckiest people on this planet are people that are able to kind of combine both what makes them tick as a person and what they spend their working hours doing. And it feels like if you can do that, and it sounds like you've kind of got there or gotten certainly very close to doing that, then it doesn't, that work-life balancing becomes a bit less of a question. I feel like when there's a real disconnect between, I really love poetry and I'm spending all day working on numbers, then it becomes, okay, how do I balance up love for poetry with numbers to make money? So I reckon if there's, it becomes a moot point if you are kind of connected with something that you really love doing.
Yeah, because I mean, it's what you do, isn't it? It's like
Well, I think we're very lucky in Digital Village because, that's one of the...
We have naps
things
every day, don't we?
Yeah. Often find Jason fast asleep on the sofa.
Napping underneath his desk.
I mean, on a semi-serious note, I mean, we spend a lot of our times at work, of our life at work, and if it's not something that is, impactful or contributes positively or is meaningful to the individual in some way, then it's seemingly a waste of time.
What's the point?
Yeah.
Like seriously. Well, and I know that's a very privileged thing to say because there's a lot of people that don't get the chance to kind of think about passion or they just want to put food on the table. But if you are in a position where you can step back a little bit and you're not kind of like going hand to mouth, it is a very privileged position to be able to think about, okay, how am I going to, I'm going to spend more time at work than anything else I've been doing in my entire life. Yeah. How can I make it not suck?
Yeah. And it makes those kind of late nights, it's motivating factor because you're not doing it for some unforeseen purpose, like for no reason other than money.
Yeah.
But even if you can't step back, I think if you're working in an organisation where you're normally working for the man, you can still ask the question, what is the purpose of this organisation that's going to make me want to get out of bed in the morning and come and work?
100%. And everyone has the right and should ask what is the purpose of the company they're working for. And if you don't have a good answer to that, then the company needs to figure it out pretty quickly. It's a big problem.
And it's also that, watching the behaviours of your work colleagues and the people you're working with and asking the question, are they exhibiting the kind of behaviours that I want to be associated with and make me proud to be part of this organisation? And if that's not the case, then perhaps it's time to try and find something else, even if you're not sort of totally purpose-driven.
And it really helps for, I feel like I don't need to manage my team at all. Hire brilliant people, give them the purpose, and just give them the space to be brilliant. And they motivate themselves. You don't have to tell them what to do, oversee them, manage people. It's just
no threats? No abuse? Oh my God.
Always hire people smarter than you.
Yes,
Seriously, it makes you look good. And the
So
staff
true.
that we've hired over the years, at Junkee, kind of hundreds of people over 15 years. And I'm going to say almost all of them were kind of like people that just, all of them did things that I couldn't do. And they were all kind of like, most of them were smarter, and I mean that in a genuine way. And the stuff that they did, you just sit back and be like, oh my God. And then being, when the co-founders of the business, it kind of like reflects well on the co-founders.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So as a young female CEO, basically, from what I've heard, it sounds like almost entirely self-taught. What would your advice be to a young woman that wants to make an impact in the world and go on her own journey?
Oh, I say go for it.
Just go for it.
Just go for it. Don't be scared. Get to know yourself though. I think that's probably the best thing I've done. While learning how to run a business, I've also been learning about myself and what are my what are my trigger points and where are my insecurities and how are they going to come down and kick me in the face when I least expect it. And they do come up even now, 3 years later. There are times where I'm just overwhelmed by self-doubt, but I can see it. I'm like, okay, thank you. Off you go. And I think that's the most important thing. So yeah, go for it. Be prepared to learn a lot about yourself and business.
And any lessons that you've learned on that journey that would help them find, a happy path to becoming a successful CEO or entrepreneur?
I think find good people.
Yeah.
Find good mentors. Surround yourself with people that are doing good things and are supportive. I think people that run for-purpose businesses are naturally more open to helping other people as well. And yeah, mentors, try and find some mentors, although I've had a really hard time with that. Yeah.
I mean, is there, like in the business world, is there a lot of female mentors? Is there like communities of that?
I think there's definitely more men than women. I think maybe the fact that less women, previously in generations before me, women weren't elevated to leadership positions quite as often as men, so there's a lack of balance in male and female mentors. There's some brilliant women out there that I've met though.
And would you recommend a woman always have a woman mentor?
I've had a lot of issues with male mentors, to be honest. I don't know how much you want me to talk about this, but
would you mind sharing? Someone might find it quite helpful.
Okay. There's been a couple that I've trialled, and they just got bloody creepy on me. It was just weird, and both were from big corporate institutions previously. One made a comment of every young woman he mentors falls in love with him.
Okay, that's a bit of a red flag.
Needless to say, I never spoke to him again.
Were you paying these guys?
That was an initial interview.
Okay, all right. So
another one was paid though, and he shocked me. He told me to use my erotic capital to get what I want, which is just downright disgusting. Erotic capital.
Okay.
Which is?
I don't know.
Wow. Okay.
Something not worth talking about.
No,
It's something about the idea of if you're young or female in a older male-dominated world or whatever. Even I think it can even go the other way. If you're a good-looking young man or something, you have some sort of superpower or something. It was coined about 10 years ago and swiftly disappeared because it's just disgusting.
What a kind of a disgusting concept.
It is so disgusting.
The quicker you can slam the door on people like that and
Yeah.
get them out of the industry or just not have anything to do with them, the better our entire world is going to be.
Yeah. And I also felt like it was a bit of a slap in the face, like I'm only in this position because someone found me attractive or something.
It's insulting.
It's so insulting.
It's insulting.
It's really insulting. So needless to say, he's gone too.
Okay, so do you have a mentor now?
I don't.
You're right. Okay.
I'm running wild and free. But definitely open to, I think I'll go women next time who have been on this journey and can lead the way. I need a wise woman.
Yes. So
show the way.
any wise women out there?
Get in touch,
Tegan's
please.
keen to talk to you.
If you're game.
Good. Okay. So just to kind of wrap things up, Tim, can we just come back to purpose-driven organisations? Besides obviously saying read the book, would there be 2 or 3 things that you think people should consider to help become purpose-driven?
Yeah. I think the first thing is the first step of the book, but I actually think it's the most important thing, is before you do, if you're launching something new, before you do anything, think about the impact you want to have first.
Yeah.
If you're already in an organisation, it would be really asking those questions around, if you don't know what the purpose is, what is our purpose? How is that lived out on a daily basis? Is it values that, as we said, is kind of like you mentioned once at a conference and then never spoken about ever again? Or is it something that's actually lived out on a daily basis?
Yeah.
And the last one is something that I'm exploring a bit for my second book, is around this concept of kindness in business. I feel like the word kind isn't a word that's often associated with business. It's a word that doesn't really kind of come up much. And I feel that if people do want to actually be purpose-driven, you have to figure out how to be kind.
Yeah.
Kind to your people you work with, kind to everyone you interact with, kind to the environment that you're in, kind to the community you're a part of, kind to your customers.
Yeah.
And it's just a really, really interesting area that I'm kind of exploring at the moment, because I feel like there's room for a lot more kindness in business.
100% agree.
Is there any, I don't know how deep you are into your kind of research on that, but have you come across any organisations that do that very well? I mean, is it some...
Organisations that are the closest to B Corps.
Yeah, right.
So the kind of the concept of B Corp is kind of putting some framework around that facilitates and measures the kindness of the organisation.
And when you say kindness, do you mean like compassion? You know, having an understanding of people and circumstances, or what?
Yes, it's quite a broad kind of term. It kind of comes down to empathy, I think, and kind of not just empathy towards from one person to another person, but also to concepts like the environment and concepts like the to yourself as well. And like business is really hard, as we all know, and you have to be kind to yourself. And look, I really resonated with what you were saying before around you can almost like know the signs for when you think something might be spiraling out of control, or you might not have full grasp on what's going on. And you kind of need to recognise that those signs in yourself, if it's self-doubt or something like that, and be kind to yourself and just take some time out and go for a walk. That's kind.
Yeah.
And also the realisation that life, when you go to a funeral and you look back on someone's life, it's not an earnings call. No one gets up and presents how much you made and your frequent flyer status or anything. People talk about how kind you were and the generous and the impact that you had on others while you were living.
These are the things that matter to people, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, ultimately,
that's what matters.
relationships, kindness, friendships.
It's asking the question, what do you want to be known for in 50 years' time? Will anybody remember you as being a manically successful business person, or being a really kind and generous individual?
Or you did well in Q4 of 2021.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's right.
Is that they're going to say that?
That's
performance managed out of the business.
That's what you stay up at night worrying about.
Oh, yeah.
Totally, and it's also what a lot of our systems are built around. So incentive systems are built around things like that. I don't quite know what the incentive system around being kind would be, but I just think it's just a really fascinating area that I think if anyone's thinking about being a purpose-led business, don't be a dick.
That's a good
My
start point.
Is it Bhutan that have measured their GDP by happiness?
And they're one of the happiest country in the world. And also one of the kind of poorest countries in the world.
Which is interesting.
So we've had a comment in from our listener. Bini Amin has given you some advice here, Tegan, which is take a look at Future Women's leadership and mentoring platform.
Okay.
And she says, shame to hear the difficulties around finding a mentor. Sad to see this kind of behaviour perpetuates in positions of leadership and guidance.
Great suggestion.
Really good idea. Another comment here from Alicia. I know what you mean, Tegan. Future Women sounds good, but maybe we need to set up our own female leadership and mentoring program. We could have any gender, but they need to be vetted and not creepy. Sounds sensible.
So
That's a great idea.
Future Women are great. Do you know of them?
No, I don't actually.
Set up by Helen McCabe, who was the kind of head of content at Nine, who we both know well.
Yeah, we do,
and she's building this amazing kind of community of women helping women.
Yes.
And
great professional network.
Great community.
Okay, that'll cost you $5,000, by the way, Helen. Thank you. Catherine, Tegan, you're doing amazing work. Keep going.
Thank you.
Getting a fan base out there already. Fantastic. Well done. Okay, so we've got to wrap things up. Guys, thank you very much indeed for taking time to spend time with us and with our audience today. Absolutely fascinating conversation. I hope that we can follow up as well, and I hope that everybody gets hold of the book and the next one. Tim, looking forward to seeing that. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
We're going to be back again in just over a month's time. There'll be information on the website about it. And there's also going to be a recording of this going up on the Digital Village website in about 2 or 3 days' time. So if you haven't been able to watch the whole thing, or you cut off halfway through, it will be there as well. Thank you again, and look forward to being with you again next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.